everybody. I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Zee Garcia.
And I'm Mike DeLisio.
Today we're taking a look at a game called Life in Reterra. And the name's a little weird. Reterra is kind of like they're re-terraforming Earth because this is the future. I guess Earth has been destroyed, but this is kind of a positive rebuilding. What makes this game interesting is that this is a more of a gamer-style game from Hasbro, designed by Eric Lang, actually. This is currently, it's a Target exclusive. That was the only place I could find it. But this is a polyomino sort of game? I don't know. Z, show us how to play it.
I got it. Here we're taking a look at the game setup for 3 players. Each player begins with one of these starting tiles face up in their area. They have 3 of these other tiles from the shuffle deck. And then we're going to flop out another 5 for them to select from. We're going to pick these 5 buildings here. They can come from the entire collection, but you basically need 2 of them that are size 2, as indicated up here, and of course the building tile itself. 2 of these size 3s, and one of the big ones, a 2x2 size 4 here. So you've got those. Every one of these cards is double-sided, having different powers on the other side. And like I said, there are a variety of these in the box, so you can make whatever flop you want here. Up here, there's a little reminder of what you're doing on your turn, and you are pretty much ready to go. You're going to be scoring based on a few different things. You have a score pad right here. I'll go over that in 1 second. But generally, the flow is going to be as denoted up here. The first thing you do is you place a land tile. You can either take one of these and place it, or you use one of the ones in your hand that they will not be replenished, so you only have those 3 for the entire game. Then, if the land that you put out has a gear on it, you could, if you want to, place a building or an inhabitant on that tile, on that gear, and possibly other previous gears that you've placed. And then you may use a building power if you have one that applies. With that done, you replenish this, assuming you took one of them, and it is the next player's turn. The game keeps going until we've built this 4x4 grid with one of these being one of the tiles. So 4x4, and then you're going to score. So what are you going to score for? Well, you're going to score terrain segments. That is the same type of terrain if you have 7 or more of those pieces. So say these 2 together would be in green. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you get a total of 7 or more, every time you do that, you get 3 points. Energy sources, if they are surrounded by other land types, you get 8 points. What's an energy source? They look like this. And if you surround this on every side, including diagonally, you're going to get 8 victory points for that. Relics. Those are icons that you'll see on some tiles, denoted right there, a scene right here, or a token. Sometimes you'll put out these tokens here on locations. Every one of those is going to be worth 1 victory point. So these and the tokens. Inhabitants are going to be worth 1 victory point. The inhabitants here are going to go out on your gears sometimes, and they will be worth victory points, 1 apiece. Buildings, whatever they say they're worth, normally the number up here. And lastly, if you have any junk, which is this, the other side of that token, and they're likely going out and covering up your relics and turning them into junk, most likely, but basically every one of these you have is going to be minus 1 point. Anywhere they are on your display, minus 1 point. That's where your scoring is coming from. Let's go ahead and take a quick look at how a couple of rounds might go. I'm going to start over here with this player. They are going to, on their turn, they will draft a tile, they will place it, and they will replenish that tile like so. It is the next player's turn. The next player will take a tile, they will place it, and replenish. And again, the other option is they could be taking a tile from their hand. Though normally you want to save this for a particularly opportune time, but you could do that. So this player is going to go, they're going to take this one, they will place it like so. You can freely rotate these. You always have to place like this. You cannot do anything like that, nothing like that. It has to be next to something that's already there and completely side to side like that. That's done. We go back to this player over here, and then this player is going to take this one. They're going to place it there, and now they're going to add a building. Now they could also, When you place one of these, as I said earlier, you could just put an inhabitant there. You could just put somebody there or put somebody here, whatever they want on the new tile. But they can also, now that they've created a group of gears of the same land type, they can put a building on there. In this case, one of these or one of these, because nothing else fits in that configuration. So we'll take a look. This one here is called the Junk Catapult, and it says, when placed, place a junk token on a relic in both of your neighbors' communities. So that would use a junk token to cover up somebody's relic like that. That player has one, that player doesn't have one, so maybe I won't do that. It won't hurt them. And then this one, the Observatory here, says it's worth an additional 2 points if placed on any spaces at the border of your community. Well, that's not going to work out anymore. These are not on the border of my community anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and take the Junk Catapult, I'll place it there, and I'll put one junk on that player's battery there. There's nothing to affect over there. With that done, I replenish this. You'll see the building amounts are limited. And we keep going around with that player playing and so on and so on. These other buildings here, I've shown you these two. The next one here, the sports field, says if you have at least 3 types of visible relics in your community, place one inhabitant on any space at the end of every turn. This one here says at the end of infirmary, at the end of every turn, place one inhabitant on this building or any other building on the same segment of continuous terrain as this building. A little wordy, a little weird, and it's not clear if on this building means simply on this building, and that's it, and I can just keep stacking them on this building, or if they mean each one square of the building can take one person, and then once you've got 3, there's no longer room for them. That's a complete assumption, though. That's not in the rule book. They don't explain the capacity of these places. And then lastly over here, the public square, the big one, worth 5 victory points, says your inhabitants are each worth 1 additional point. If you have this, every inhabitant you have is worth not 1, they are worth 2. And that's the general idea. Keep going until everyone has completed their community. Figure out your score using the score pad. And whoever has the most points is the winner of the game.
All right, and I should make mention there's another designer, Ken Gruhl. So there's 2 designers here. And this game at first came across my radar because it was announced as, hey, this is a mass market game, but it's more of a gamer's game from Hasbro. And that's true. Hasbro mostly does, y'all know what kind of games Hasbro makes. Mm-hmm. The theming of this game in the future disappears about 2 seconds in, I felt, because you're just putting tiles down and putting things on them. But the pieces are pretty nice. I like some of the things. One thing I really enjoy is that board that shows you how many pieces to put on per player. What a nice thing. I don't have to look it up. Oh, there's a 3-player game, we need 7. They're just, you follow the lines. I thought that was a nice aspect. And then the place to put the card that shows you what the buildings do. I thought that was pretty good. And for the most part, save one exception, the rules, I thought the components for this were pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely, especially for the price point. I think the quality here is outstanding, actually. The pieces are a little thin. The buildings themselves are a little thin. But the squares that you're actually building out are nice, good quality. The whole thing has a very nice production to it, good-looking bits. I think it's a good-looking game. And yes, you're right about the rulebook, but we can circle back around to that.
Yeah, this is, as you said, Zee, especially for the price point and for a mass market game, this has a fantastic production. I don't even mind. At first, when I was punching out the buildings, I was like, oh, these are pretty thin. But the bottom line is that they're actually fine for what they're doing, right? It's more important to me that central board is there, that basically not only has ease of setup for the number of players, but it also has basically everything you need to know about what you do on your turn on there, which is nice. And like you said, Z, those tiles are nice and thick. I think they're even UV coated, if I'm remembering right, like on the gears and things like that. You've got the screen printed wooden inhabitants. So a really, really nice production and real issues with the rule book. I'm glad you mentioned it first.
Yeah, well, I will say, companies in the world, please do make your rule books this size, the size of a normal book. For all that's holy, please, please. Anyway, so the rule book here. So this game was touted as a very simple game. I don't get that from this, right? We often talk about simple, gateway, family, welcoming style games that have a few rules. This has more than a few rules. I mean, I was sufficiently engaged in this, and I had to look things up. And it starts out. The rule book's almost a little bit like, hey, do this and you'll be fine, you'll figure it out kind of thing. But then I'm looking for stuff and there's not a good section on how does each building work, which I think is pretty critical because if I'm running into questions, Joe Schmo who goes and buys this at Target is also going to run into those questions. Right. Simple things like, what happens when we run out of the different people to put on the stuff? Do you do something? I don't know. How about these? How does this building work specifically? It doesn't say. And I felt like that stuff, I mean, the basic on how to play the game worked, but I felt like that stuff was pretty critical.
And it's interesting, too, because one of the buildings that we both independently ran into the same issue and the same problem with is one of the buildings that they recommend you begin with. They're like in that original flop of, yes, you should use these 5 buildings as your first 5. On the one hand, one of them is really nasty and very sort of confrontational, which, again, maybe people are perfectly happy with that, and if you're not, you can get away from it. So that's fine. But one of the buildings has big kind of questions that aren't answered. The amount of content here is commendable. It really is. There's a lot of variety in setup here. But it's a concern when one of the absolute first things that you're telling me to use has glaring holes in the explanation of it.
Yeah, I was frantically waving my hand because I wanted to know if we all had the same building in mind. Because obviously I did not play with either two of you. Are we talking about the hospital here?
It's the one where you're supposed to put a person on that building every time something happens, and the question is, when do you stop putting people on there? Is it one time on the building? Is it the building takes 3 squares, so is it 3 times on the building? Can I just keep putting people on there and stacking them up? Nowhere does it indicate this building one can house 1 inhabitant per square. That's not in there.
Yeah, that was absolutely the issue, or at least one of the issues. And like you said, it was especially egregious because it was in the recommended starting set of cards and buildings that you use. We eventually came down on, it's a 3-space building. You can put 3 inhabitants on it. And the reason why...
And that's what I did as well. Otherwise, the rule about once that runs, you can also put people on gosh, how's it worded? On other buildings in the same contiguous group of terrain. I'm like, okay, well, I'm assuming then the building has some sort of capacity, and I guess the capacity is 3. But it could have easily been 6. Maybe every square houses 2 people. I have no idea.
The first game we played, we housed it that at the end of every turn, you're putting an inhabitant on there. And it was just, like Tom said, you ran out of inhabitants very quickly. We just came down on the fact that it was, first, as you said, Z, it made no sense. The only way it made sense for the second part of the card was if you were putting them on other buildings. And 2, it was just way too overpowered. It's already a 4-point building to begin with when you build it. And if you put 3 inhabitants on it, that's 7. That seems to be in line with what you can get from the other buildings if you max them out. We're spending a lot of time talking about this one particular aspect, but that is indicative of a larger issue. And I think that's why we're kind of honing in on this one, is that there are several ambiguities in the game. And the rule book, as you said, Tom, it has a very conversational tone. It's kind of like, hey, hey, put this down, do this. It makes it sound like it's very, very simple and intuitive. And it's not. There's a lot going on, especially for people that are maybe used to playing only Hasbro-type games.
Now, I will say that the general play of the game, I enjoy. I really like the idea. One thing I really liked was you're drawing a tile to put it out. But you have some of your own that you can save for that moment. You're like, oh, I really want that purple tile, but Zee keeps taking them, or whatever it is.
Yes.
I can save that for that point. I thought that was nice, and it's fun to put them together. Again, I'm not trying to keep trash on the game, but again, some of the things like a group of 7, which isn't always easy to count. I would have, some markers to mark that or something would have been nice. But I like putting those tiles out and then figuring out how to form a building. And those 4 buildings, which are hard to get out, the 4 size ones.
Yes.
And what building you pick, and there's not a lot of options of that, so it's kind of nice. I thought that whole play worked well for me. You're building a 4x4 grid. The one building acts like the monasteries from Carcassonne, where you're surrounded and you get points, the energy sources or whatever.
Yes, right.
It's fun. You have different things to do, and I found that to be engaging.
It's certainly the cadence of the game is very pleasant. I agree with you there. I find the gameplay, and I didn't even honestly have that hard of a time from sort of cracking the game box to playing from bang to bullet. It's pretty quick, and it works out well. And that cadence of grab a tile, place a tile, maybe put a little dude on there, maybe put a building on there. That's it. Next, go. It's got a good flow to it. I actually disagree with you about those energy sources, and I know that the concept behind this game was this idea of it being a perfect sort of place in between mass market games and something a little more complicated, feeling like it bridges that gap. I thought that the energy sources were maybe just a hair too much. I thought that was a strange one.
Maybe it's because I played games with that sort of thing in it before.
I thought it was an exception to a very good set of rules, which is take a tile, place it, little symbols are plus 1 point, gears get stuff put on them. There's also this one, which is 4 squares of water with a thing drawn on them, and if you surround that, that's 8 points. Okay, is there another example of that? No, it's the only one that exists like that. Like, oh, that's kind of weird. You could have just done that with buildings, right? With the ones we get from cardboard. Yes, but we built it in. Why? Like, that seems weird to me.
I agree. It's kind of incongruent with what else is going on. And again, not to keep hammering the rule book, but I'm going to keep hammering the rule book. You guys got the rule book in front of you, right? If you look on page 10, when it describes the placement of the energy sources, and it does it in pictorial fashion, they make to me, a really, really unnecessary blunder on how they visually represent it. The idea is that the energy sources are going to be surrounded orthogonally, right? Which means on the 4 sides of the main edges. In the rule book, they give an example where they say they put an X with a circle around it in a diagonal fashion. And it makes you think, because it made me think that they're saying, oh, this one is not valid because there's nothing in the upper right. No, they're just saying it's not valid because it's only surrounded on 2 sides. But by placing that X there, it made me question, well, what are they saying? Are they saying that it's going to be surrounded orthogonally, or does it have to be completely surrounded? So again, it takes something that is a simple concept, and just because of a poor rule book, brings up more questions than need to be there.
It has to be said, and Zee already alluded to it when we were talking about the rules, about the very much in-your-face nature of the game. Mm-hmm. I'm very surprised that they have the starting set they did, if for one, because there's some confusing buildings, sure, but also because there's some straight-up mean buildings. And mean in an interesting way, in the sense that if I'm sitting between Zee and Mike, the buildings are affecting them, and if I'm deciding to be mean, it affects both of them, but, Camilla, who might be in the kitty corner to me, she's fine.
Right.
And in my first game, that's definitely happened to me in a good way, where the person who was very aggressive was sitting diagonal to me, and I was like, whew, glad that person ain't sitting next to me, but it made me win. right? Because of that. And also, you might not like that, take that nature. Now, I know some people do, so I'm not saying this is a negative. I just think you need to go in knowing that. And I would recommend for most people that peace and quiet set that they recommend in there as the first set. And I'm kind of surprised it's not. I mean, yeah, there's they have the unfriendly neighbor set, which I would never play with. But I don't mind a few go after other people things. It's just weird that it hits your neighbors only.
I agree, and again, there's just a couple of buildings in there that just feel really mean, very targeted, and not only do they give you something negative, but actively take away something positive.
Right, it's a swing of 2 points. That's a lot.
And some matchups in this, some buildings want you to collect specific junk, whatever they call it, specific symbols. So if you're affecting someone who's going for set collection in that way, you could be hammering them, truly hammering them, by covering up something that they were counting on. It's just something to be aware of. Yes, you can get away from that. Just don't play with that one card. But it does feel strangely incongruous to the sort of cozy feel that I think the game seems to be going for.
Yeah, I think they even describe it as cozy, if I remember right, somewhere, either in the marketing or in the rule book. But the only thing that I'll say to that is there's two things. One, Tom mentioned, is that they have a way to make it so that it's no take that cards in the game and it's not that difficult to do. And two, I think the take that is much more acceptable and almost expected in mass market type games than they are in hobby games. And although this one skews more hobby, it's really going more to a mass market audience. And so I think that it doesn't surprise me that much that there's at least one direct negative interaction card, because you expect to see that a little bit more in these types of games.
Now, I will say we've been talking a lot of negatives here, and I think it's more pointing out things that maybe weren't quite there. The rule book has issues, clear issues. It's not atrocious. I was able to learn from the rule book and play. I had questions. It's not the only game I've had questions in. I had questions. The tiles, some of the tiles are thin. They don't matter that much. The game is mean. You can get away from that. So I just feel like a lot of negative things have been mainly pointed out. I want to talk about some positive things I kind of did already. One thing, the general cadence of the game I found super pleasant.
Yeah.
The game does not outstay its welcome at all. It's a fast-moving game. Great to be able to throw down a game with this kind of much interest in 25 minutes. That's a great return on that time investment. The variety out of the box really is commendable. There are a lot of buildings in there. The scalability of the game, I think, is good. I think you can play with more, with fewer. The board lets you know how many buildings to put out, like you said. That works out well. The look of the game and the insert are really fantastic.
By the way, I think it's really cool that for the insert, you can build a set of buildings that you like together and have them in one of those closed containers. Open it up, there's the cards, there's the buildings, go.
That's really cool.
That's really neat, and that's almost unheard of in mass market.
That's fair, yeah. So, anyway, I just wanted to mention a few things that I do like about the game.
Well, overall, I like the game. I'm giving it a 7.5. I think it's very enjoyable. I think it was mismarketed like, hey, anyone can play this one. And I'm like, whew, I think I would have them play Ticket to Ride or even Cascadia maybe before this. But at the same time, this is kind of a nice next step game. And for me, which is what I'm reviewing at, I enjoyed it. I like picking them. I wish... I don't know that I want to play with the go after other people cards all the time, but there's enough other cards in here that I can kind of ignore that. And the concept here, I don't know, someone here in the studio was comparing it to King Domino, which I don't particularly see that much, but I can see if you like one game, I could see you moving to the other. And there's a lot of tile placement games where you're building patterns, but this one felt more focused, putting the buildings on. So for overall, I enjoyed it, and I really love the artwork. I really like the art.
So there I was comparing this game to King Domino.
Was it you?
Yeah, I think it was me who first said that, yeah. I do think it's similar, and I think, again, the push has been this is incredibly approachable. Anybody can play it. I think King Domino's an easier game to play than this, and it
Oh,
has, yes, a
sure.
couple of rules that are a little quirky, sure, but so does this. You know, there's a certain amount there of things you need to learn and internalize, and King Domino has some, but I feel like it might be a little more approachable even than this. King Domino doesn't have the good looks of this, but I actually think King Domino might be even slightly less abstracted, because these buildings and you sort of plopping this out in this weirdly mixed up terrain you're discovering, I guess. Where in the world is this? That you have like a lake next to a
The world's
a
been
forest,
destroyed. Big
you know?
chunks have been
Is that
torn
what
out.
it is?
I'm sure of it.
Okay. So there is a certain level of abstracted gameplay there. Having said that, I'm actually coming down at the same score you gave it, Tom. I'm also giving this a 7.5, 7.5. I also like it, and I absolutely think there is a place for this game. It's one I enjoy playing. Like I said, I have kept finding myself smiling while I'm playing it. I think part of it is just how easy and how sort of relaxing it is to play this game. Exploring more of the buildings, more of the combinations, that's fun. Yes, absolutely, I would put together a set in my box and be like, that's my favorite way to play. Every time I open it up, I just open up that one box, set out the buildings, and I'm good to go.
Yeah.
I like that. So 7.5 from me.
This one was a little bit tough for me because I had to kind of wrestle with myself on saying, okay, how much, if at all, should you be considering what the game is being marketed as versus what it is? And I came down on the fact that I'm not going to let that influence my decision at all. Because marketing is not really what it's about. It's about this game. And this game, I think, is pleasant. I think it is a pleasant game. I think that the usability, the only thing that works against the usability in this game is the rule book, because everything else is fantastic. You can keep the tiles and the trays that it comes with if you want to. You can keep the inhabitants and the relic junk tokens in the thing that they came with if you want to. You know, the little individual. They've talked about those kind of trays that can keep things very, very nicely organized. All of that is great and makes the game easy to get on the table, easy to get played in a very reasonable amount of time, like Z said, and you are getting, you know, a full game experience. However, it's a crowded market, I feel, for this type of game. Cozy games are coming out like crazy right now, okay? Polyomino games, certainly no shortage of polyomino games out there. Building power games, again, nothing that you haven't seen before. And I just feel like that this game is going to be too much for mass market players, and it's going to be more suited for family weight hobby gamers. So I don't think that this would go into the realm of like a Kennerspiel if we're talking about German family weight categories. I think this would be on the upper end of the Spiel, de Jahres. And so I don't think it stands out enough from other games that are kind of in this, you know, kind of in this niche in the hobby. And so I'm giving it a 6 out of 10. It's not a bad game by any means. I'd be happy to teach this to people at a game day or at a convention. If someone wants to play it, I'll have no problem playing it at all. But it's not one that I'm going to be telling people to rush out and get unless they particularly love this theme, which is clearly, you know, playing off of a Minecraft or Terraria type of a vibe. If you really like that, sure. Or if you really like, you know, King Domino or other games that kind of use this kind of a tile laying, polyomino laying process. But overall, 6 out of 10. Pleasant game, but not one that I necessarily would recommend.
All right, well, there you go, folks. That's Life in Reterra, a community rebuilding game. I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Zee Garcia.
I'm Mike Delisio.
And we're prepared for the end of time. Hey
everybody, thanks for watching another video from the Dice Tower. Hey, you want to learn more about us, communicate with us? We have a Facebook group, we have a Discord channel, lots of different ways to get involved with the Dice Tower. You can find that in our Linktree link below. So just click that, it will take you and you can communicate with us on Facebook, join our Facebook groups. There's lots of cool things that you can find and become part of the Dice Tower. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Tom Vassell.